I love cryptid stuff myself, so I was pretty excited when I recently found out that my late grandfather had an encounter with one when he and my father lived in the Soviet Union. Be Granddad, an electrical engineer, gets called into a town near the shores of Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is known for, among other things, being fed by 330 rivers but emptying into only one lake, having an incredible ecosystem of thousands of species, half of which are only found there, being the deepest lake in the world, being the biggest lake in the world by surface area, and being one of the oldest lakes in the world, as well as being the center of all manners of legends and creepy happenings. So my grandfather arrives by the time it's getting dark, so the client insists that he stay the night in the Gatsinista, but not before inviting him for supper. Over the meager meal they discuss details of the problem and possible solutions. As the sky darkens, the client makes an odd remark that sounds out of place coming from the mouth of such a fellow. Do take care not to leave your room in the Gatsinista during the night. There are creatures out there. After checking how much vodka the client had to drink, my grandfather asks him what he means. And after a little hesitation, and a request for him not to talk about this, the client obliges my grandfather. Around the forests we find huge mounds of droppings, with whole skeletons intact, of sizes everything between and including wolves and bears. These crab mounds are left behind by giant snakes that live in the lake. This was the only doubtful part of the story, as a snake usually wouldn't want to venture into the freezing cold lake, though it would make a great deal of sense for such a creature to reside in burrows underground. Reports of sightings of the creature are only heard once or twice a year, compared to the often seen mounds, because, well, human bones, too, fall into the purview of everything in between, and when a set is found, reports of a missing person from as far as 2 towns over are never far behind. But try not to think about it too much. Just stay in your room for the night, and do have a good night's rest. My grandfather had little trouble not thinking about it as he made his way to his room that night, as the story frankly stunk of giant snake crap. So giving the whole silly thing no more thought, he changed into his night clothes and swung open the room window to let in a cold breeze. He studied the schematics a little longer until he was satisfied that he had figured it out, then got up to extinguish the light and get some sleep. Turning towards his bed in the now dark room, he sees peeking through the opened window the head of a huge snake, illuminated by pale moonlight, its tongue flicking up and down. As any sane man would do, he ran into the closet and shut the door behind him. For not more than 20 seconds he heard the most infernal thrashing of wood against wood, and leathery flesh, and of papers and bed covers being whipped about at breakneck speeds. That small time felt like an eternity, as did the minute or so until he heard a rapping on his room's door, and a man's voice. "What the hell are you doing in there? You've woken everybody up, and I've called the police." My grandfather rushed out of the closet, through the wrecked room, and out into the hallway, slamming the door behind him. He gets accosted by the owner until the police arrive, who inspects the room, or what was left of it. Papers are all about, the furniture reduced to splinters, and the bed covers were nowhere in sight. My grandfather collected his few remaining things, and as per police orders, was given a different room for the night. One of them stepped aside to talk to my grandfather. "Don't open your window again. We don't want to come back here tonight to recover a body, or worse." The rest of the trip went by uneventfully. My grandfather fixed that problem, and promptly returned to Ukraine, where he and my father, then in his early youth, lived. But my grandfather did bring one thing back. On a trip to the Museum of Natural History, he brought it between the pages of a book, meaning it was probably a scale. My grandfather shows it to the curator, who shows great interest in it. My grandfather relates the story of how he got it, and the curator inspects it excitedly. The curator asks if he can hang on to it to conduct some research, and assures my grandfather that he'll show him the findings. My grandfather accepts and parts with the thing, but the curator never did give it back to him. But my grandfather did get back to the curator, after having some difficulty finding him. The curator responded almost angrily to being questioned about the item and his research on it. "That thing you brought me was a hoax, and nothing more. I've decided I want nothing to do with the damned fake thing, and I suggest you decide the same." And that pretty much concludes the story. Now, the strangest thing about the story, at least to me, is that before hearing it, I had heard of all sorts of strange going-ons in and around Lake Baikal, but never of anything like this. The only thing relatively close was a single isolated mention of a possibility of a Nessie-style plesiosaur entering the ecosystem through one of the 330 rivers feeding into the lake, since one of those things could be mistaken as a giant snake, but there's just about nothing else. Quite the peculiar affair, isn't it? What's hiding or being hidden at Lake Baikal?